The air shimmered with flashes from cameras, laughter echoing against the velvet-lined walls of one of Los Angeles's most prestigious charity events, the Baby2Baby Gala. Stars glided down the red carpet, names that carried weight, influence, and money. It was a night of glamour, generosity, and carefully crafted appearances. But that evening in 2025, beneath the chandeliers and flashing bulbs, something unexpected and almost cinematic unfolded. A moment so bizarre that even the Hollywood elite, used to every kind of spectacle, didn't know how to react. Because when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, appeared at the entrance, they weren't on the list. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What happens when royalty tries to crash the most exclusive charity gala in Hollywood? What drives two of the most scrutinized public figures on the planet to show up uninvited and act as though they belong? And why did the CEO of the event, Norah Weinstein, finally decide to break her silence after what insiders now call the most awkward night in Baby2Baby history? This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't a simple mix-up at the door. It was the spark that reignited Hollywood's quiet frustration with Meghan and Harry and exposed just how far the couple would go to stay in the spotlight. But to understand why this moment hit such a nerve, we need to rewind to the very world they were so desperate to re-enter, a world that once adored them and now regarded them with quiet skepticism. Because in Hollywood, image is currency, and that night, their credit had finally run out. The 2025 Baby2Baby Gala wasn't just another charity dinner. It was the Oscars of philanthropy, a golden evening where billionaires and A-listers competed to prove who cared the most about the world's children while sipping $1,000 champagne. It's the kind of event that has gatekeepers tighter than any royal palace, where every seat, every table, every photograph is meticulously planned months in advance. Invitations are more coveted than front-row seats at the Met Gala. So when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry arrived, dressed to perfection, she in a silver gown meant to command every camera's attention, he in a classic tuxedo that still carried the shadow of his royal past. Everyone assumed they were meant to be there. Of course they were. How could they not be? They were the charitable royals, the couple who built their image on compassion and modern humanitarianism. Except, according to Norah Weinstein, Baby2Baby CEO, they weren't invited. Imagine that for a moment. The most high-profile couple in modern royalty walking into a charity event like it was their personal stage, without an invitation. Not a VIP pass. Not even a last-minute confirmation. Nothing. And yet, there they were. Cameras turned. Heads tilted. Conversations stopped. Security froze, uncertain whether to question a prince or simply let the illusion of glamour sweep over the awkward truth. Why would Meghan and Harry do something like that? What could possibly compel them to risk public humiliation, knowing the scrutiny that always follows them? Was it arrogance? Desperation? Or something deeper? A fear of fading into irrelevance in a world that once worshipped them? Because one thing's for sure, it wasn't about charity. Norah Weinstein's revelation didn't just expose an awkward night. It cracked open a bigger story, one about control, perception, and a couple fighting tooth and nail to remain part of an industry that's quietly moving on without them. Picture the scene as it began. The night glittered with Hollywood royalty. Jennifer Garner mingled near the floral archway. Reese Witherspoon laughed beside a sponsor's backdrop, and Kim Kardashian's team buzzed around her like a royal entourage. Every move choreographed, every flash calculated. This was more than a gala. It was an ecosystem of fame. And into that polished world walked Meghan Markle, glowing as though she were the guest of honor. The cameras followed her instinctively. Reporters rushed to capture the shot, not yet realizing what was unfolding behind the velvet rope. For a brief moment, Meghan's illusion worked. She had stepped back into the Hollywood she once ruled. But it wouldn't last. Behind the scenes, organizers scrambled. Names were checked, cross-referenced, double-checked again. No sign of Duchess of Sussex. No mention of Prince Harry. Not even under H. Staff whispered nervously among themselves. Because how do you tell a royal they're not invited? The story might have stayed buried if not for one thing. Norah Weinstein's quiet professionalism colliding with her sense of integrity. As CEO of Baby2Baby, her mission was to keep the night flawless. But as she later admitted, This wasn't something she could just sweep under the rug. They weren't on the list, she would reveal later. Simple, direct, devastating. That sentence, in its simplicity, changed the tone of the night and set off a firestorm that rippled far beyond the gala ballroom. Because if Meghan and Harry had truly gatecrashed, it meant something no one had dared to say out loud before. They weren't the guests everyone thought they were. They weren't the adored global icons of compassion they projected to be. They were outsiders looking in and pretending they still belonged. The irony? This was supposed to be their comeback moment. After months of criticism, canceled projects, and Hollywood fatigue, the couple had reportedly been searching for the perfect stage to re-establish themselves among the elite. The Baby2Baby Gala, known for its star-studded guest list and moral gravitas, was their dream backdrop. Cameras, charity, celebrities. All the ingredients for a redemption narrative. But redemption requires authenticity. And on that night, authenticity was the one thing they didn't have. Sources later claimed Meghan's team had assumed she'd be welcomed automatically because of her past attendance and connections to key donors. But assumption is not an invitation, and that assumption exposed something far deeper about how the Sussex brand operates. They weren't invited because their relationship with Hollywood had cooled, quietly, subtly, but decisively. The insiders who once fought to host them had begun to see the backlash as too risky. The whispers about their constant need for control, the off-camera dramatics, the endless PR manipulation, all had taken their toll. So when they arrived uninvited, it wasn't just embarrassing, it was symbolic. It represented the end of the illusion that they could walk into any room and still be welcomed as royalty. Still, the night didn't erupt into chaos immediately. The gala continued. Awkward smiles, exchanged glances, whispers that followed them from table to table. Meghan did what Meghan always does. She smiled, posed, radiated control. Harry followed her lead, polite but visibly uneasy. People clapped, not out of admiration, but out of confusion. Because how do you treat uninvited royalty? As the night wore on, Meghan reportedly tried to speak with Norah Weinstein. Whether it was a plea for understanding or an attempt to assert status remains unclear. What's certain is that Norah, with decades of experience dealing with celebrity egos, remained composed. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't publicly embarrass them. But her decision that night, to say nothing then, and everything later, was a masterstroke of dignity. Why did Norah choose to reveal the truth months later? Some insiders believe it was damage control. Others say it was about restoring the integrity of the charity's reputation. After all, Baby2Baby thrives on credibility, on the trust of donors who believe in its transparency. Allowing the world to think Meghan and Harry were VIP guests risked undermining that. But maybe there was also something personal. Maybe, deep down, Norah felt what many in Hollywood had quietly felt for years, that Meghan's brand of relentless self-promotion was consuming the very causes she claimed to champion. And when the truth finally broke, it spread like wildfire. Headlines roared, gatecrashers at the gala. Social media lit up with disbelief. Was it possible that two of the most photographed people in the world had to sneak into an event just to feel relevant again? The answer, according to insiders, was yes. Yet, this wasn't a random decision. Meghan and Harry's calculated attempt to reinsert themselves into the narrative of Hollywood philanthropy was part of a larger strategy, a desperate move to repair a damaged brand after months of silence and growing detachment. Netflix had moved on. Spotify had closed its doors. The Archwell projects had stalled. They needed visibility. They needed to be seen with the right people. So they took the risk and paid the price. Imagine the irony. A couple who once claimed they left royal life to escape judgment, now orchestrating appearances to reclaim the very validation they said they didn't need. Meghan's perfectly practiced smiles, Harry's quiet discomfort, the photographers who didn't yet realize the awkward truth. It was a scene dripping in poetic contradiction. And somewhere in that crowded ballroom, Norah Weinstein watched it unfold, calm, composed, but deeply aware that something wasn't right. Her event, designed to celebrate generosity and authenticity, had become the stage for an illusion. When the lights dimmed and the final speeches ended, Meghan and Harry reportedly exited as smoothly as they'd entered. Cameras followed them outside, flashes bouncing off the sleek black car waiting at the curb. They waved, smiled, and disappeared into the Los Angeles night, unaware that their presence would soon ignite one of the most embarrassing scandals of their public lives. Because what came next wasn't silence. It was exposure. And it didn't come from the tabloids. It came from the very heart of the event itself, from Norah Weinstein, the woman who ran Baby2Baby with grace and integrity, finally deciding that enough was enough. Her words, when they came, were simple but lethal. They were not on the guest list. And just like that, the illusion shattered. But the real question still lingers. How did they get in at all? Who made the call that allowed them past security? And why did no one stop them? Because if there's one thing Hollywood knows, it's that nothing that dramatic happens by accident. And as we're about to uncover, what happened behind those closed gala doors wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a carefully choreographed move that exposed the lengths to which Meghan and Harry would go to stay relevant, and the powerful woman who refused to play along. Because when Norah Weinstein decided to tell her side of the story, she didn't just expose a scandal. She revealed something much bigger about Hollywood, about image, and about what happens when royalty forgets that real invitations can't be demanded. They have to be earned. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a hush. Not the kind of hush that happens when the lights dim for a show, but that thick, stunned silence that falls when something feels off, when everyone in the room senses something they can't quite name yet. The 2025 Baby2Baby Gala was in full swing. Champagne glasses clinked, soft jazz played beneath the hum of celebrity chatter, and the red carpet had just wrapped. But inside the ballroom, the night took an unexpected turn. Because suddenly, the air changed. Two figures appeared at the entrance. The crowd shifted, almost instinctively. Like a wave moving toward the shore. Heads turned, necks craned. Cameras clicked again, even though the photo session was technically over. And there they were, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, radiant, confident, and walking in as though the night had been planned around them. But it hadn't. Wait, were they invited? One stylist whispered to another. I didn't see their names on the seating chart, came the hushed reply. And that was the moment. The moment that stunned Hollywood. The moment when everyone realized no one had been expecting them. Now, picture the scene. The event was held at the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood. All glass, light, and elegance. Baby2Baby had spared no expense. A-listers, producers, and CEOs mingled beneath cascading floral arrangements. Every detail had been curated to perfection, every guest list vetted and verified by Norah Weinstein's team. So when the Sussexes walked in, it was as though a royal apparition had materialized out of nowhere. The irony? Meghan had attended Baby2Baby events before. She knew the process, the RSVPs, the confirmations, the table assignments. Yet here she was, walking in without one. Did she assume her name still carried enough weight to skip the rules? Or had she truly believed she was invited? Either way, the effect was electric, and not in a good way. The maitre d', caught off guard, hesitated. Staff exchanged nervous looks. The volunteer managing the guest registry froze. Do you stop a royal? Do you question them? Or do you just let them walk in and pray for the best? And that's exactly what happened. They let them in. Meghan's smile never faltered. She walked with that familiar grace. Head high, expression calm, eyes scanning the room as though she owned it. She waved subtly to a few familiar faces, pretending not to notice the whispers that trailed behind her. Harry followed, polite but stiff, scanning the crowd with that half-smile he wears when he'd rather be anywhere else. The cameras found them instantly. Flashbulbs reignited like fireworks, feeding the illusion that all was as it should be. Because in that moment, image triumphed over reality. The world outside would see photos of Meghan and Harry at yet another glamorous event. None the wiser that behind the smiles, confusion had erupted. But inside the gala, people noticed. People always notice. Who cleared them? One coordinator muttered into her headset. No one. They just walked in. Within minutes, text messages began flying between staff and event planners. Norah Weinstein's assistant, seated near the stage, received a frantic note from security. The Sussexes are here. Not confirmed. The note made its way to Norah's table. She read it twice, her expression betraying nothing. She simply folded the paper, placed it beneath her napkin, and continued her conversation with a major sponsor. But those who knew her could tell, the CEO's mind was racing. Because for Norah, this wasn't just about two surprise guests. It was about the integrity of an event that symbolized everything she'd built. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry mingled effortlessly, or at least Meghan did. She gravitated toward the spotlight, striking conversations with Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington. She complimented dresses, posed for photos, even offered to sign an auction paddle for charity. It was the perfect performance. Except no one had asked her to perform. And that's where the unease began to creep in. You could feel it, that subtle tension that floats in the air when everyone's smiling, but no one's comfortable. People exchanged glances that said what no one dared to voice aloud. Why are they here? Because in Hollywood, everything is transactional. An uninvited guest isn't just rude, it's unpredictable. It means someone bypassed the system. Someone broke the code. By the time appetizers were served, half the ballroom knew. Meghan and Harry weren't on the guest list. And yet, there they sat, front and center, perfectly framed for every photo, as though destiny itself had reserved the spot. Was it arrogance or strategy? Because let's be honest, this wasn't a random pop-in. Meghan knew what the Baby2Baby Gala meant. It was prestige, press, and the illusion of belonging to an elite circle of philanthropic power. The cameras that night weren't just there for charity. They were there to capture who mattered. And Meghan needed that photo. Months earlier, her public appearances had dwindled. Their Netflix deals were under strain. Hollywood's infatuation with the Sussexes had cooled. And so, what better way to remind the world of her relevance than to appear, uninvited, at the most exclusive charity event of the year? The move was bold, maybe even brilliant. But it was also reckless. Because the one person Meghan underestimated that night was Norah Weinstein. While Meghan glided across the ballroom, Norah quietly observed. She'd seen egos before, A-listers, billionaires, influencers who believed the rules didn't apply to them. But this was different. This was royal entitlement dressed in designer ethics. And Norah wasn't impressed. Still, she played her part. The night had to run smoothly. Guests needed to be entertained, donors thanked, and children's causes highlighted. No drama. No confrontation. Not yet. Harry, meanwhile, seemed increasingly uneasy. Insiders later claimed he kept checking his watch, avoiding eye contact with staff, and standing slightly behind Meghan as she took the lead. He smiled when expected, but spoke little. Almost as if he knew something was wrong, but couldn't stop it. Can you imagine being him in that moment? A prince without a kingdom, standing in a room full of people who no longer saw him as royal, just famous. The cameras flashed, but the warmth was gone. The admiration had turned to curiosity, tinged with doubt. Still, the couple held their composure. When the charity's keynote speech began, they clapped, nodded, and posed graciously for photos. Everything looked perfect, until it didn't. Halfway through the evening, the seating confusion reached a breaking point. The table where Meghan and Harry had seated themselves? It was reserved for major sponsors. 6 donors who had contributed millions. People who were supposed to be there. And now, there were no seats left. Panic spread quietly among the staff. Where do you relocate a prince and duchess who aren't supposed to be there? You can't ask them to move. You can't cause a scene. You can only rearrange reality around them. One coordinator whispered frantically, "We'll move the sponsors to the next table. Tell them it's a mix-up." It worked, temporarily, but it didn't go unnoticed. One guest, a top Hollywood producer, was overheard saying, "So they just show up and take my seat? That's rich." It wasn't long before gossip turned into strategy. Some guests saw opportunity. Others saw chaos. But everyone had an opinion. And as dessert was served, Meghan leaned over to chat with Norah herself. Witnesses later described the moment as chillingly polite. Meghan thanked her for hosting such a beautiful evening, praised the cause, and even hinted that she'd love to collaborate in the future. Norah smiled, a perfect, practiced smile, the kind that hides steel beneath charm. For Norah, it wasn't the time or place to expose the truth. Not yet. But the damage had already been done. Word had spread. The illusion was cracking. By the end of the night, whispers had turned into quiet outrage. Baby2Baby's board members were confused. Donors wanted answers. And Norah, maintaining her poise, knew she'd have to deal with the fallout, but on her own terms. As the Sussexes left, paparazzi swarmed outside. The photos looked stunning, Meghan glowing under the lights, Harry smiling at her side, the perfect royal image reborn. But those photos, as beautiful as they were, told a lie. Behind them, inside the ballroom, Norah stood with her staff, reviewing the seating list one last time. Every name accounted for, except theirs. They weren't invited, she finally said quietly, as though confirming what everyone already knew. And tomorrow, people will start asking why. And people did ask. The next morning, Hollywood woke up buzzing. Blogs speculated about the mysterious gate crash. Insiders began leaking fragments of the story. And one question dominated every whisper in the industry. How did Meghan and Harry get in? Was it a security lapse? A staff mistake? Or something orchestrated from within? Because there were rumors, faint but persistent, that someone inside the event might have helped them. Someone who took a call, made an exception, or pretended not to notice when the royals walked in. The theory was wild, but in Hollywood, truth is often stranger than fiction. And while Norah Weinstein stayed silent, for now, her team began quietly retracing the night's steps. The call logs, the registration desk, the name tags. Every detail mattered. But what they found would soon prove that this wasn't an innocent mistake. Because as it turned out, there was a phone call, one that would explain everything. A call that came just hours before the event. A call that changed the course of the night. A call that might reveal exactly how Meghan and Harry managed to bypass the system entirely. And when Norah discovered who was on the other end of that call, her calm turned to fury. Because it wasn't just about who let them in. It was about why. And that reason would shake Hollywood's trust in Meghan and Harry more than anything they had ever done before. But what came next would make the gate crashing look like child's play, because that single phone call would unravel a web of manipulation that went deeper than anyone imagined. And Norah Weinstein? She was about to find herself in the middle of it all. The truth was coming. And when it did, no one in that ballroom would look at the Sussexes the same way again. How did they get in? That was the question that echoed through every corridor of the Pacific Design Center the morning after the 2025 Baby2Baby Gala. Staff huddled over guest lists. Coordinators scrolled through registration tablets, confused faces illuminated by blue light. Security teams reviewed footage frame by frame, searching for that one moment, that single lapse that let the Duke and Duchess of Sussex stroll through the velvet rope as if the night had been waiting for them. And somewhere, sitting in her minimalist Beverly Hills office, Baby2Baby CEO Norah Weinstein stared at her phone, replaying one voicemail over and over again. The voice on the other end was polite, charming, even convincing. It claimed to represent a close friend of the foundation. It requested a last-minute confirmation for two distinguished guests, names that, apparently, carried their own gravity. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. The message ended with a simple line. They'll be arriving around 8. Please ensure the entrance team accommodates them discreetly. It was the kind of message that, under normal circumstances, might have raised questions. But not at an event where every hour brought a new VIP, a new demand, a new crisis to smooth over. In a night that blended chaos with glamour, a single call didn't seem suspicious until the truth came out. Now, the staff knew it hadn't been official. It hadn't come from any registered donor or known affiliate. No one could trace the number to an event sponsor or executive contact. The call had slipped through like a shadow, exploiting one fatal assumption, that no one would ever dare to impersonate someone close to Baby2Baby. But someone had. And the result? The biggest charity scandal Hollywood had seen in years. Let's rewind to that moment behind the velvet rope. Picture the entrance. The soft hum of camera flashes. The scent of fresh lilies drifting through the marble foyer. Security guards in sleek black suits checking tablets and clipboards, ensuring every name matched. Then suddenly, a quiet murmur from one of the attendants. There's been an update, she said, glancing at her earpiece. 2 additional VIPs. The Sussexes. The guard looked puzzled. They're not on the master list. The attendant frowned, then nodded as though remembering something. Norah's office approved it. Except, Norah hadn't. A wave of uncertainty passed between them, but hesitation gave way to assumption. After all, who questions royalty? Who risks the embarrassment of turning away a prince and duchess at the door? And so, with one uncertain nod, the velvet rope was lifted. The Sussexes stepped through. Cameras caught their arrival from the perfect angle, capturing Meghan's signature half-smile, that delicate mix of confidence and charm, and Harry's awkward but dutiful grin. For the crowd outside, it was just another royal entrance. Inside, it was a silent breach of protocol. But here's what made it all worse. There were whispers that Meghan's team knew about the guest verification process and deliberately bypassed it. Some insiders suggested her staff had called multiple numbers, looking for a weak link, and found one. A temporary coordinator. Someone inexperienced enough to believe that a last-minute change was plausible if it came with the right name attached. It wasn't a hack. It was persuasion. Because in Hollywood, manipulation rarely looks like chaos. It looks like charm. By the time Norah arrived at the venue, the Sussexes were already inside. Her staff, nervous but professional, briefed her discreetly. "They're here. We couldn't find their confirmation, but we were told they were approved by your office." "My office?" Norah asked quietly. "By who?" No one could answer. That moment, that single exchange, marked the beginning of her anger. Not the explosive kind, but the cold, deliberate fury of someone who understands that a line has been crossed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't order them removed. She simply observed. Because Norah knew something that most people forget. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon in the room. The gala continued flawlessly on the surface. But behind the curtains, Baby2Baby's operations team was unraveling. The backstage chatter was relentless. Security guards whispered in hallways. Assistants scrolled furiously through call logs. Event managers double-checked every digital pass issued in the last 48 hours. And still, nothing matched. It was as if the Sussexes had materialized from thin air. Meanwhile, Meghan mingled freely, her laughter echoing across the ballroom. She seemed oblivious to the tension she'd left in her wake. Her every move screamed control. The way she tilted her head when speaking to photographers, the calculated warmth in her compliments, the way she held Harry's hand just long enough for the flashbulbs to capture the perfect frame. But Harry? Harry looked tired. You could see it in the small gestures, the sighs between photos, the polite nods that never quite reached his eyes. He looked like a man performing a part he no longer believed in. And perhaps that's what made the whole scene even more surreal. Because while Meghan sparkled under the chandeliers, the staff in the control room were scrambling to keep up appearances. Baby2Baby couldn't risk a scene. The event had live coverage. Major networks were watching. Sponsors were present. The image had to remain pristine. So they smiled. They pretended. They adjusted seating arrangements. They whispered quietly into earpieces, keep them comfortable, for now. But for Norah, the situation was personal. Baby2Baby had spent years building its reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected charities. It wasn't about glitz, it was about genuine philanthropy. It provided diapers, clothes, and basic needs for children in poverty. Every donation counted. Every sponsor mattered. The gala wasn't just a party. It was the heartbeat of the organization's funding. To see it hijacked for publicity felt like betrayal. And in the middle of that betrayal stood a woman who had built her image around empathy, now using that same image to manipulate the optics of generosity. Did Meghan realize how it looked? Or did she simply not care? Because here's the thing, Meghan and Harry weren't just famous. They were powerful. And power, when misused, can distort perception. People wanted to believe the best of them. They wanted to think the Sussexes were there to support the cause. But beneath the charm lay a quiet truth. Their appearance had stolen attention from the very children the gala was meant to help. When the night ended, and the Sussexes left, Norah's staff gathered backstage. No one spoke at first. The exhaustion of the evening hung heavy in the air. Then, one of her senior coordinators broke the silence. "They hijacked the night," she said softly. Norah didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the clipboard in her hands, the guest list that bore every name but theirs. Then she folded it neatly and said, "Find out who made that call." The next morning, the investigation began. Baby2Baby's communications director pulled phone records. Security footage was reviewed. Within hours, a timeline started to form, one that would reveal a startling pattern. At 3:42 p.m., the mysterious voicemail had arrived. At 4:01 p.m., a follow-up email had been sent from an unverified address that mimicked Baby2Baby's own domain. By 6:30 p.m., Meghan's car was spotted near the venue, arriving earlier than expected. And by 8:03 p.m., the Sussexes were inside, photographed and smiling. It was seamless. Too seamless. Norah suspected it wasn't spontaneous. She suspected coordination. The next day, she called an emergency board meeting. She played the voicemail. The room fell silent. The voice wasn't identifiable, but the message was clear. Someone had leveraged the couple's name to pressure entry. Whether it was someone on their team or someone posing as them remained unclear. But Norah had her doubts. She knew how carefully the Sussex brand was managed. Every appearance, every word, every partnership, calculated. Meghan's team didn't leave things to chance. If they'd wanted to attend, they would have reached out directly. And if they didn't, then someone else wanted them there, for reasons that weren't about charity. Could it have been a PR setup? An orchestrated stunt to recapture media attention? It wouldn't be the first time a celebrity had engineered a surprise appearance to dominate headlines. But this was different. This was royalty, and Hollywood doesn't forgive easily when it feels used. Over the next few days, whispers turned into theories. Some claimed an insider from a PR agency aligned with Meghan had made the call. Others believed a rogue fan tried to help them sneak in, unaware of the damage it would cause. But one theory struck closest to the truth, that Meghan's team had floated their attendance through unofficial channels, knowing it would be easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Why? Because once they were photographed inside, the narrative was sealed. No one could unsee it. And they were right, until Norah Weinstein broke her silence. For now, though, Norah stayed quiet. She played the long game. She wanted proof, tangible, undeniable proof. And she would get it. As her team traced the communication trail, one discovery stood out. The IP address from the follow-up email led not to a fan, not to a hacker, but to a location in Montecito, less than 3 miles from the Sussexes' estate. Coincidence? Perhaps. But Norah didn't believe in coincidences anymore. She didn't release the information. Not yet. Instead, she prepared a quiet report for the board, detailing every anomaly, every timestamp, every inconsistency. She wanted the truth, not speculation. Because Norah Weinstein wasn't just protecting her reputation. She was protecting the integrity of something much bigger, the trust of every donor who believed in her cause. And she knew one thing for certain. Whoever made that call had underestimated her. While Meghan and Harry's photos from the gala trended on social media, glowing, polished, royal, Norah's office light stayed on late into the night. The voicemail replayed again, and again, and again. And each time she heard it, the anger sharpened. This wasn't about a simple breach anymore. It was about principle, about the quiet war between authenticity and illusion. Norah had seen it before, celebrities turning charity into spectacle, empathy into brand strategy. But this was different. This was personal. Because this time, it had happened on her watch. And she wasn't going to let it slide. What Norah didn't know yet was that her search for answers would uncover something much darker than a forged call. A hidden hand. A deliberate manipulation. A game of influence that stretched far beyond the gala ballroom. One that might involve people far closer to the Sussexes than anyone dared to imagine. Because behind the velvet rope wasn't just a story about who got in. It was about who opened the door. And when Norah finally discovered that name, it would set off a chain of events that no amount of royal charm could undo. The next clue would come from an unexpected place, a witness who saw something no one else did. And what that witness revealed would turn the entire narrative upside down. It always begins with a call. A single ring that shifts the balance between truth and deception. The kind of call that sounds harmless, almost routine, until you realize it was the thread that pulled everything apart. That's exactly how it happened on the afternoon of the Baby2Baby Gala. The phones at the event coordination office rang nonstop that day. Deliveries, press confirmations, last-minute schedule changes. But one call stood out. It didn't come from a donor or a sponsor. It didn't come from a recognizable publicist. It came from an unknown number with a polished, confident voice on the other end. "Good afternoon," the voice began smoothly. "This is just a courtesy confirmation for tonight's Baby2Baby Gala. 2 of your special guests will be arriving privately around 8, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry." The staffer paused, uncertain. "I'm sorry, could you clarify which table they're assigned to?" "Oh, no table is needed," the caller replied. "They'll only stay briefly to greet Norah Weinstein and support the children's initiative. Norah's already aware. Please ensure discretion at the entrance. The press will handle coverage." Then came the click of a line gone dead. No name. No follow-up contact. Just confidence. The kind of tone that leaves no room for doubt. And that's how the gate opened. Later, Norah Weinstein would listen to that voicemail more times than she could count. Every word replayed like a haunting melody, familiar, calculated, and too smooth to be improvised. Whoever made that call knew exactly what they were doing. The phrasing was perfect. The timing was impeccable. Just late enough in the day to avoid scrutiny, just authoritative enough to override procedure. The caller didn't demand, they implied. They didn't ask, they instructed. It wasn't a request for permission. It was an illusion of authority. So who were they? At first, Norah's team assumed it was someone from Meghan's PR agency, possibly a new assistant unaware of the strict guest policies. But as they dug deeper, the contradictions piled up. The agency denied involvement. Emails showed no correspondence about the event. No calendar notes. No official RSVP. But then came a revelation, a witness. A volunteer stationed near the entrance that night remembered something odd. She recalled seeing a woman in a headset, someone who looked like part of the event staff, walk over to security just before the Sussexes arrived. She whispered something, showed a text message, and then nodded toward the door. Moments later, the royals walked in. Who was she? When Norah reviewed staff photos from the night, one face stood out. Not a Baby2Baby employee. Not a contracted event planner. A freelancer hired through a third-party agency for media coordination, someone who'd never worked the event before. Her name, Claire Jennings. At first glance, Claire's file seemed ordinary. As Norah's investigation deepened, the timeline crystallized. 3:42 p.m., the initial call came through. 4:01 p.m., the follow-up email arrived, using an address that mimicked Baby2Baby's internal domain. 6:15 p.m., the freelancer, Claire Jennings, was seen entering through the service gate, claiming she was there to assist with media management. 7:58 p.m., Claire positioned herself near the check-in desk. 8:03 p.m., the Sussexes arrived. Coincidence? Not a chance. When security reviewed surveillance footage, the pattern became undeniable. Claire stood just behind the registry attendant as Meghan and Harry entered. She nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible signal, and whispered something into her earpiece. Seconds later, the velvet rope lifted, and then Claire disappeared. After the couple entered, she left the venue through a side door. She never returned. Her phone was disconnected the next day. Who was she working for? Norah had a theory. It wasn't random. Claire wasn't a rogue volunteer. She was part of something orchestrated, someone's carefully planned operation. Maybe not Meghan directly. Maybe not Harry. But someone in their orbit. Because here's what Norah understood better than anyone. Nothing around the Sussexes happens by accident. Every appearance, every gesture, every lens angle is curated. If they'd shown up uninvited, it was by design, a risk they calculated, believing their presence would outweigh the scandal. Used to craft a false image. Used to manipulate public perception. Used to exploit the goodwill of an organization built on authenticity. The irony was staggering. The same couple who preached compassion and transparency had allowed, or orchestrated, one of the most calculated stunts in charity history. When Norah finally confronted her inner circle, she didn't mince words. This wasn't an accident, she said. This was infiltration. Her communications director nodded grimly. But what's the goal? Publicity. Norah exhaled slowly. Control. They wanted to reclaim control of their narrative. And they thought using us would make them untouchable. It was brilliant in its simplicity and reckless in its arrogance. But Norah wasn't done. She wanted proof solid enough to silence speculation forever. So she reached out to a trusted ally, a cybersecurity consultant who had previously helped Baby2Baby secure its donor data. Within hours, they traced the fraudulent email back to an IP range linked to a private network used by several Montecito-based publicists. It wasn't definitive, but it was close enough to sting. And when Norah shared this with one of her board members, the response was immediate. You can't go public yet, they warned. If you accuse them without proof, their lawyers will bury you. Norah knew they were right. The Sussex team had deep pockets and a reputation for aggressive legal responses. So she played the waiting game. Quietly. Methodically. Meanwhile, the story outside took on a life of its own. Tabloids called it a royal surprise. Social media lit up with photos of Meghan and Harry smiling at the gala. Some fans praised their generosity. Others sensed something off, the way no official Baby2Baby account mentioned their attendance, the way the charity's website didn't list them among guests. The silence was deafening, and in that silence, curiosity grew. Then, days later, a Hollywood gossip blog dropped a headline that blew the story wide open. Were Meghan and Harry invited to the Baby2Baby Gala? Sources say no. The post cited anonymous staffers, describing confusion and chaos backstage. Norah didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. She didn't need to. The truth was already leaking. Within 48 hours, major outlets picked it up. The story trended globally. Hashtags like #GateCrashers and #RoyalRuse flooded social media. Meghan's PR team scrambled. They released a carefully worded statement. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were honored to support Baby2Baby's incredible mission and were grateful for the warm welcome they received. But the one person who didn't offer a warm welcome was Norah Weinstein. When a journalist reached out for comment, Norah responded with a single sentence that hit like a hammer. They were not on the guest list. That line, calm, composed, and surgical, detonated across every news cycle. The illusion shattered overnight. Suddenly, every photo, every smile, every gracious pose from that evening looked different. What once seemed glamorous now looked desperate. The royals who had once stood for authenticity now appeared to be manipulating charity for clout. And behind that public fallout, Norah quietly continued her private investigation. Because one question still haunted her. Who was Claire Jennings? When she finally got the answer, it was even worse than she expected. The cybersecurity consultant traced Claire's payment trail, not to a fake identity, but to a limited liability company that handled event staffing for multiple celebrity clients. And one of those clients? A publicist closely tied to Meghan Markle's former production team. It wasn't direct evidence, but it was a breadcrumb trail leading dangerously close to home. Norah didn't speak. Not yet. She knew timing was everything. Because the moment she revealed the truth, it wouldn't just expose the gate crash, it would expose the machinery behind it. The calls, the manipulation, the illusion of royal kindness, that was, perhaps, nothing more than carefully packaged PR theater. And if that theater extended beyond one gala, if this was a pattern, then Meghan and Harry's entire brand of benevolence could crumble overnight. But Norah wasn't the only one closing in. Because while she traced phone calls, someone else, someone inside Meghan's own camp, was about to break rank. And when that insider spoke, they would confirm everything. Not just the call, not just the infiltration, but the motive behind it, and the shocking revelation that this wasn't the first time. It had happened before, and it would happen again. Anger doesn't always arrive with shouting or chaos. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, steady, deliberate, waiting for the right moment to strike. That's how it came for Norah Weinstein. When the truth settled, when she realized that her charity, her event, her legacy, had been used as a pawn in someone else's vanity project, Norah didn't slam a desk or scream. She didn't post a cryptic statement or call an emergency press conference. She just sat in her office, staring out the window as the Los Angeles sun began to set, her reflection merging with the city lights. To everyone else, she looked calm. But inside, something was burning. Because for Norah, Baby2Baby wasn't just an organization. It was a promise to every mother who couldn't afford diapers, to every child living in shelters, to every donor who trusted that their money went toward good. She had built that trust brick by brick, year after year. It was her life's work. And in one night, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had turned it into a spectacle. When Norah learned that the mystery caller and fake event worker were likely connected to people within Meghan's PR network, her disbelief turned into something sharper. It wasn't just deception. It was arrogance. The kind that assumed everyone else existed to support the royal narrative. Norah replayed every detail from that night in her mind. The phone call, the entry, the whispers, Meghan's dazzling smile as she worked the room like it was her private kingdom. And then that moment, small but unforgettable, when Meghan leaned close during a photo op and said softly, "I just adore what you're doing here, Norah." So meaningful. Meaningful. The word echoed like an insult. Norah remembered smiling politely, but her eyes had stayed cold. Because she knew Meghan didn't understand meaning, not in the way Baby2Baby did. The charity wasn't about photo ops. It was about real people. And yet, That night, Meghan had turned it into her stage. For days after, Norah stayed silent. Her communications team begged her to release a clarifying statement to stop the speculation swirling online. But Norah refused. She wasn't going to defend herself against chaos she didn't create. She wasn't going to play their PR game. Instead, she waited, she watched, and she planned. Because she knew how Hollywood worked. It wasn't about who shouted the loudest. It was about who controlled the truth when the noise died down. Behind the scenes, Norah began assembling a small, trusted circle of advisors. Her goal wasn't revenge. It was accountability. She wanted to protect the integrity of her charity and expose the manipulation that had invaded it. And it started with one question. How many others had they done this to? She wasn't alone in asking it. Quietly, other charity directors began reaching out. One, who preferred to remain anonymous, told her about an unofficial royal appearance at a private fundraiser 2 years earlier. Another recalled sudden media coverage of a Sussex donation that turned out to be more symbolic than financial. The pattern was emerging. Meghan and Harry had perfected the art of borrowed benevolence, attaching themselves to high-profile causes not to uplift them, but to absorb their shine. Norah's jaw tightened every time she thought about it. Every photo from that night, Meghan smiling beside celebrity guests, Harry posing by the Baby2Baby logo, had been used as free publicity. The charity's name trended worldwide, but not for its mission, for its scandal, and Norah couldn't stand it. She called a meeting with her communications director, Lila, and her legal counsel, Mark. The air in the office was tense. Lila sat across the desk, scrolling through an endless feed of social media posts. Mark flipped through a folder filled with call logs, emails, and transcripts. They're turning it into a misunderstanding, Lila said. Meghan's PR is framing it as a miscommunication between teams. They're implying we mishandled the guest process. Norah's eyes darkened. So they're blaming us for being gate-crashed. Mark leaned forward. They're protecting their image. It's what they do. They'll never admit it was intentional. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Norah said quietly, "Then we'll show them what intentional looks like." That night, after everyone left, Norah stayed late. The office was dark except for the glow of her laptop. She opened the digital archive from the gala, everything from video surveillance to internal emails. She wanted to see it all herself. She watched the footage again, Meghan and Harry entering, the staff's hesitation, the subtle nod from the mysterious woman. The details were burned into her mind. But what struck her most wasn't the act itself, it was the confidence. Meghan walked in without looking back, without checking, without doubt, as though she knew she would never be questioned. That was what infuriated Norah. The assumption of immunity. The belief that power, even faded power, could bend the rules. The next morning, Norah drafted an internal memo to her board. It wasn't angry. It was methodical. She outlined the incident, the evidence, the findings, and the reputational risk. Her tone was professional, but every line carried the weight of betrayal. She ended the memo with one line. Integrity is not negotiable, not for anyone. When her board read it, they were stunned. Some wanted to stay quiet, fearing backlash. Others urged caution, warning her not to cross the Sussexes' media empire. But Norah's mind was already made up. She wouldn't be bullied by image makers. Over the next week, Norah began quietly reaching out to allies. Trusted journalists, influential donors, and Hollywood figures who had witnessed the gala firsthand. She didn't leak stories or make threats. She simply shared the truth. Calmly, privately. And in that quiet sharing, a ripple began. People listened. They remembered their own encounters with the Sussexes, the exaggerated promises, the shifting narratives, the performative empathy. What had once been dismissed as gossip began to feel like revelation. Meanwhile, Meghan's camp kept pushing their version of events. Carefully worded statements filled the press. The Sussexes are committed to philanthropy. They were deeply moved by Baby2Baby's mission. Any confusion was purely logistical. But there was one thing they hadn't expected: Norah's reputation. She wasn't just another Hollywood organizer. She was respected, fiercely. Baby2Baby had been her creation, her proof that kindness could be structured and efficient. When she spoke, people believed her. And when she finally broke her silence, her words were measured, but devastating. They were not on the guest list. Just 8 words. But they cut through every spin, every excuse, every PR statement like a blade. The reaction was immediate. Reporters scrambled. Social media erupted. Not invited? Gatecrashers? Did the Sussexes fake their way into a charity gala? The royal couple's supporters tried to defend them, but the cracks were showing. For the first time, the public began to question the authenticity of their philanthropy. Norah didn't enjoy the fallout. She didn't gloat. She didn't post victory statements. She simply focused on restoring order, tightening security protocols, retraining staff, rebuilding trust. But even as she buried herself in work, the anger simmered underneath. Not explosive, but enduring. The kind that drives action. One evening, as she left the office, she found herself standing outside the Baby2Baby warehouse, the heart of the charity's operations. Inside, volunteers packed boxes of supplies for struggling families. That's what this was all supposed to be about. Real impact. Real people. And yet, her mind flashed back to Meghan posing for cameras, smiling in front of donation boxes she'd never touched. That's when Norah made a decision. She wouldn't just fix the aftermath, she would expose the system that allowed it. Because if one royal couple could manipulate their way into a charity gala, how many others were bending the truth in the name of doing good? She reached out to a documentary filmmaker she trusted, someone who had previously covered philanthropic frauds and influencer ethics. They met quietly in a Beverly Hills cafe. Norah laid out the story, the call, the infiltration, the spin. The filmmaker listened intently, then said, "You realize if you go public with this, it'll be war." Norah smiled faintly. Then let it be. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. She knew the risks, the backlash, the headlines that would paint her as bitter, jealous, or anti-royal. But she also knew this. Silence only protects those who exploit it. And while Meghan's team scrambled to maintain the illusion of elegance, Norah was preparing to dismantle it, piece by piece, fact by fact. Her plan wasn't immediate. It was slow, deliberate. She wanted timing. She wanted precision. But as fate would have it, she didn't have to wait long. Because a few weeks later, an unexpected email landed in Norah's inbox. It came from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. "You're right. I was there." Attached was a short audio clip, a recording from the night of the gala. And in that recording, a familiar voice spoke softly into a headset, just seconds before Meghan and Harry walked through the door. "They're on the list now. Let them in." Norah's heart pounded as she replayed it. She recognized the voice. It wasn't the fake staffer, Claire Jennings. It was someone else. Someone with power. Someone tied to the Sussexes world. And when she realized who it was, her calm finally cracked. Because this wasn't just about one event anymore. It was about manipulation from the very top. And the person behind that voice? They weren't supposed to exist in the story at all. But what came next, the confrontation that followed, would expose everything. Everything Meghan had built. Everything Harry tried to protect. And it would begin with Norah's quiet, furious words. "I know who made the call." The ballroom that night was a dream, until it wasn't. Glittering chandeliers sparkled above silk-draped tables. The scent of fresh roses drifted through the air, and waiters glided like dancers carrying trays of champagne. The music swelled softly, a melody of wealth and good intentions. But beneath that polished surface, something darker stirred, the kind of tension you can feel but can't name. It started as a whisper, a few confused glances, a murmur at the check-in table that rippled slowly through the crowd like a wave brushing the shore. No one shouted. No one made a scene. But by the time dessert was served, everyone in the ballroom knew. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry weren't supposed to be there. At first, it was disbelief. "What do you mean, not invited?" One socialite whispered to another. "You're joking." But as the night went on, disbelief turned into curiosity, then discomfort, and finally, quiet outrage. Norah Weinstein had kept her calm, at least on the surface. She smiled, greeted guests, and delivered her speech with her usual poise. But those closest to her noticed the signs. The small tremor in her hand as she held her note cards. The way her eyes occasionally flicked toward Meghan's table. The slight tightness in her smile when cameras panned across the room. She was furious, but she was also strategic. Because if there's one thing Norah knew, it was that power reveals itself not in anger, but in restraint. Across the room, Meghan played her part perfectly. She glowed under the warm light, every gesture measured, every smile deliberate. She laughed too loudly at small jokes, leaned in close to important donors, and made sure photographers caught her in every flattering angle. Harry, on the other hand, looked increasingly out of place. He sipped his drink, nodded occasionally, and checked his watch more than once. If the night had gone according to Meghan's plan, it would have been a triumph, a visual redemption arc for the Sussexes. But reality was a different story, because while the cameras captured smiles, the whispers behind them told the truth. Did they really just show up uninvited? I heard Norah didn't even know they were coming. Imagine crashing a charity gala. The nerve. Even among Hollywood's elite, where gossip is a second language, this was something new. Scandalous. Unthinkable. Meghan sensed it. You could see it in the way her eyes flickered, just for a second, when one actress avoided her gaze. The subtle shift in her posture when a famous director offered only a polite nod before turning away. She felt the chill in the room long before the night ended. Still, she refused to falter. In true Markle fashion, she leaned into the illusion. When the host mentioned Baby2Baby's mission, Meghan applauded first and loudest. When a video montage of children in need played on the screen, she wiped a tear, carefully, gently, just enough for the nearby cameras to catch it. The irony was painful, because while she sat there performing empathy, Norah sat across the room remembering the truth, the call, the infiltration, the calculated deceit. Halfway through the evening, as the lights dimmed for the charity auction, the tension thickened. Meghan raised her hand during the first bidding round. $10,000 for a signed guitar. The audience clapped politely. Cameras clicked again, but one donor sitting nearby muttered under his breath, "Will she actually pay? Or is this another photo moment?" The comments spread like wildfire. A few laughs, a few smirks, and then silence. Even Harry seemed uneasy. He smiled, but his eyes darted toward the exit more than once. He leaned over and whispered something to Meghan, something short, quiet, and serious. Her expression hardened. She brushed it off, straightened her posture, and resumed her performance. But by that point, the illusion had cracked. Norah's staff moved quietly in the background, doing their jobs with mechanical precision. But every one of them was watching. They knew the truth. They knew the Sussexes didn't belong there. And for them, it wasn't just awkward, it was offensive. This event was supposed to honor integrity, not ego. At one point, a senior sponsor approached Norah during a brief intermission. He spoke softly, but the edge in his voice was unmistakable. "Do you want me to handle it?" he asked. Norah shook her head. "No, not here. Not tonight." She wasn't going to let them ruin the evening. The cause mattered more than the scandal. The guests deserved a flawless night, even if two of them didn't deserve to be there. Still, every time she caught sight of Meghan, something inside her twisted. The Duchess's laughter rang hollow, her charm almost mechanical. It wasn't genuine warmth, it was strategy. Meghan was doing what she'd always done, turning every room into a stage, every moment into a performance. But Norah wasn't the kind of woman who applauded performances. Rumors travel fast in Hollywood, faster than limousines, faster than PR denials, faster than any truth can ever hope to catch up. And when those rumors involve royalty, charity, and deception, they spread like wildfire. By the morning after the Baby2Baby Gala, the whispers had already started. Not in headlines yet, not in official reports, but in the quiet corners where power hides. Private text chains, exclusive brunch tables, those hushed conversations between agents and producers that start with, "You didn't hear this from me." But Hollywood's elite were buzzing. "Did you hear Meghan and Harry weren't even invited?" "No way. That can't be true." Norah's team confirmed it. "Someone faked a call." "Unbelievable. Who does that?" By lunchtime, the gossip had gone from Beverly Hills salons to studio offices in Burbank. By dinner time, it was all over Malibu. And within 24 hours, it had reached the inner circles that define reputation in Los Angeles, the Whisper Network. It's the invisible bloodstream of Hollywood. Everyone's connected to someone, and no secret ever stays contained. Publicists talk to stylists, stylists talk to assistants, assistants talk to journalists. It's the same machine that builds stars and destroys them, all depending on who's talking and who's listening. And right now, everyone was talking about Meghan Markle. What made this rumor so dangerous wasn't just its content, it was its credibility. People trusted Norah Weinstein. She wasn't the kind of person who chased drama. She wasn't vindictive or petty. She had built her career on quiet professionalism and integrity. So when word leaked that Norah was angry, genuinely angry, people paid attention. She never loses her cool, one charity director whispered over coffee in Brentwood. If Norah's upset, something serious happened. Another added, she's too smart to go public unless she has proof. So if she's saying they weren't invited, she's got the receipts. And just like that, the whispers evolved into belief. The royal couple, once Hollywood's darlings, had gone from symbols of compassion to subjects of ridicule. It wasn't open mockery, not yet. But the tone had changed. Subtle jokes at dinners. Hesitations in conversations. Invitations that quietly stopped arriving. Because in a town built on perception, no one wants to be associated with a scandal that smells like desperation. Meanwhile, Meghan's PR team scrambled behind the scenes. Emails flew, phones rang nonstop, statements were drafted and redrafted. The goal was simple: control the narrative before it became a firestorm. One publicist suggested reframing the story. We say it was an administrative error, he proposed during a tense Zoom call. A miscommunication between Baby2Baby's donor relations and the Sussexes office. But Meghan rejected the idea. We don't apologize for generosity, she said, her voice sharp. We were supporting a cause. That's what people will focus on. Harry said little. He rarely did in these moments. He'd learned that no matter what he said, Meghan's version of the story always won. By the second day, Norah's quiet dignity had become more powerful than any PR spin. She hadn't issued an official statement beyond that one devastating line. They were not on the guest list. But that restraint only made her seem more credible. Journalists began circling. Industry insiders leaked details. A Baby2Baby volunteer anonymously confirmed the chaos at the entrance. We didn't know what to do, she said. Security kept checking the list, and their names just weren't there. But someone told us to let them in. It was all the Whisper Network needed. And once the story hit private gossip newsletters, those subscription-only emails devoured by executives and influencers, it exploded. Within hours, screenshots began circulating. Markle and Harry gate crash Baby2Baby. Inside the charity